Hello everyone, and thanks once again for joining us for this Memorial Day edition of Alaska Weather on the 30th day of May 2022. I'm David Percy. Up first, we've got breakup map. Breakup is over on the southern river south of the Brooks Range now. Still mostly open, still some ice on the Noaa River and the Kobuk River there. But now breakup underway on the North Slope rivers. You can see that Colville has some open areas all the way, the entire stretch of the river there. And even the Kaparik now seeing some open on the upper reaches there. Still solid ice for the lower 2/3. And the Sag River finally showing some progression with the about 3 to 4 times more areas of some open on the upper reaches there toward the Brooks Range than there was yesterday. Otherwise, moving on to fire danger. Areas of extreme showing up now in the Susitna Valley and even down toward the east end of Turning and Arm, it looks like there, as well as a narrow band there in the Copper River Basin and north of Iliamna Lake in the southeastern Kuskokwim Valley there in the western Alaska Range, some extreme fire danger. Otherwise, quite a swath of very high fire danger from the Yukon Flats, Porcupine, Upper Yukon River, Yukon Flats area down into the Tanana Valley and southwestward into the Kuskokwim Valley and down into northern Bristol Bay and even around the, looks like Pilot Point area. Pretty high fire dangers there, as well as Togiak and the northern areas of Bristol Bay and the Yukon Delta, and to a much lesser extent over the Seward Peninsula. And I guess this is, and again, these fire dangers are for grass. Spruce is much lower on the fire danger scale if that was plotted there. And on to the next graphic here showing, let's see, this is Kodiak. A lot of low clouds and fog moved in overnight into Kodiak, and this was earlier today at about, let's see, 10:14 this morning. Still some fog, not dense fog, but definitely IFR flying conditions there. Wasn't a big surprise that was going to move in there. It looked like it was poised to yesterday at this time. But the next graphic here showing Seward, I did not think it was going to push up Resurrection Bay all the way into the Seward area like it did. You can see IFR clouds into the area there and some fog. Not so much fog, but the low cloud deck pushed right on in the deep marine layer. And again, burning back this afternoon, actually clearing out now, Seward going back to the clear skies of sunshine. And the next one, even up Cook Inlet, a lot of extensive low clouds and fog. This is Kenai, again, at about 10:30 this morning, showing, I believe, about 3/4 of a mile in fog, or maybe a mile in fog. I'm not sure what the visibility's markers are on this graphic here showing a southwest direction at the airport, but definitely I didn't think it was going to come into Cook Inlet to the extent it did, and even here it's burned back to sunny skies this afternoon, but temperatures on the chilly side, lower 50s. Otherwise, hazardous weather graphic. Flood advisory continues for the northern Copper River Basin, for the Gulkana River and Lake Louise Road area due to snow melt, and that's out for the next several days. And from there, satellite imagery showing clouds moving from west to east over the top of high pressure. Weak disturbances skirting the Arctic coast, again bringing some skiffs of snow over toward the eastern Arctic coast. Let's see, light snow overnight ended this morning at Barter Island in Kaktovik there on the eastern Arctic coast. About 1/100 of an inch picked up there in that area, water equivalent. And also a band of moisture shifting northward over the southwest interior there. You can see actually on the picture time here on the lower Yukon River Valley westward across the Nulato Hills into Norton Sound. That brought a little bit of light shower activity. Marshall had 2/100 of an inch in the last 12 hours, and Tuksuk Bay picked up about 1/100 of an inch. So a little bit of shower activity with that band of clouds. Otherwise, you can see the low cloud deck right along covering the Gulf of Alaska up to the North Gulf Coast and well up into Cook Inlet. In fact, actually getting north of the Forelands there, almost spilling into Turnagain Arm, but didn't quite make it, and banked up on the east side of Kodiak Island, an easterly flow ahead of that system coming up from the south there. Mid and high level clouds already spreading over Kodiak Island into Bristol Bay. And then the weaker system continues to wash out over the far western Aleutians west of Shimei and Attu, with a lot of clouds there, and then the cirrus shield with another storm, much stronger low, pushing northeastward. Be bringing gale force winds in. Small craft advisories coming in later tonight for the western Aleutians, going gale force for the central and western Aleutians during the day tomorrow. Otherwise, sunny and warm over the interior. Panhandle looking really good. A lot of mostly sunny sky conditions up to the Brooks Range, and you have the low clouds in over the North Slope. The temperatures back into the 60s and well into the 70s. And some isolated shower, or some scattered, widely scattered shower, possible isolated thunderstorm activity along the mountainous terrain, Alaska Range, for example, and then those showers shifting northward there to the south coast of Norton Sound and along the lower Yukon River Valley. Very light shower activity and pretty widely scattered, but more in the way of cloudy skies there, and clearing out over Bristol Bay. And then the low clouds and fog Kodiak Island slowly burning back from the coastline during the afternoon hours, but sunny skies all the way up to the Brooks Range, warm temperatures once again. Very nice day in the Panhandle. Out in the Bering Sea, high pressure dominating still, ridging from the central Aleutians up to a bigger center there that extends into the Russian Far East, and that links up with another couple of centers there, one over Mackenzie Delta and the North Slope. Lots of low clouds and fog covering the Bering Sea. Some cases even some light rain or drizzle reported at St. Paul today. For tonight, that pattern continues. Look for, again, drizzle, low clouds, fog, IFR flying conditions from the Bering Strait across St. Lawrence Island into the Pribilofs. Increasing winds coming up to at least small craft advisories after midnight for the western Aleutians, possibly going gale force, but that'll probably hold off till tomorrow. Look for low clouds, fog, maybe a little bit of drizzle there on the east side of Kodiak Island. The main precipitation field staying well south and in advance of that occluded front, some of which might spill into the Alaska Peninsula possibly. Otherwise fair, light winds, variably cloudy skies over the entire interior of Alaska, to mostly cloudy for the North Slope, fog in the Arctic coast, low clouds and fog back on shore of the coastal areas of the Panhandle and pushing back into southern Cook Inlet, maybe Resurrection Bay, southern Prince William Sound area. And then that'll burn back for Tuesday afternoon hours. Look for increasing chances of rain. Kodiak Island is that system tomorrow. Edge is close enough, but the main front kind of elongating out to the east there. Back to a chance of showers with some moisture sneaking in from Canada, British Columbia into the southern Panhandle. Then gale force winds with rain for AKwx westward to Shimei and Attu. And again, scattered showers from the DeLong Mountains in the western Brooks Range there, possibly the Noatak Valley, southward across the Seward Peninsula, Shishmaref, Buckland, chance of showers down into Nome and Golovin. And that'll also extend down into the Yukon Delta area, maybe as far south as Bethel. And along the coast, low clouds, fog, and drizzle, St. Lawrence Island. A lot of low clouds and fog across the Pribilofs of the eastern Aleutian areas. And moving on to Wednesday, that low center slips off to the east and southeast along with the front, so rain area pushes into the Queen Charlotte Islands, even south of Dixon Entrance. So look for more in the way of sunshine for Kodiak Island after some low clouds and fog in the morning on the east side, but not a bad day coming up with light winds there, and look for a sunny afternoon. Rain spreads eastward to Atka and tries to push into Nikolsky late in the day Wednesday. High pressure holding over the northern Bering Sea keeps winds light with low clouds and fog quite widespread from the Pribilofs up across St. Lawrence Island into the Chukchi Sea. And the trough brings some more light snow condition to the eastern Arctic coast with showers, isolated thunderstorms to the eastern North Slope, central eastern Brooks Range extending southwestward across the Noatak Valley to the Seward Peninsula. Another sunny, warm day for the southern half of the state down into the North Gulf Coast. And for lows tonight, 20s for the North Slope and Arctic coast, otherwise 40s to near 50 or into lower 50s, mostly in the 40s for the remainder of the state. And then the highs tomorrow, mid-70s from Juneau on up to Skagway, Haines area, and upper 60s, mid to upper 60s elsewhere over the Panhandle. So sit in the valley, approaching 80 once again, call it 77 for Talkeetna, 76 for Gulkana, and 75 to 80 over the central interior, warmest around the Fairbanks area. Highs edging above the frost point there for the eastern Arctic coast, 40 to 45 on the west side. Highs in the 40s over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Lows the following morning, upper 20s to near 30 for the Arctic coast and North Slope areas, 40s to near 50 for the remainder of the state, except mid-30s for the Pribilofs, lower 30s St. Lawrence Island. And for afternoon highs on Wednesday, 70 to 82 or 75 to 85 maybe, possibly. That 85 probably a little high, but definitely probably some areas showing 80 plus temperatures there through the interior there from the upper Yukon Valley, mid-Tanana Valley down in toward Bristol Bay, and 70 to 80 for the Kenai Peninsula and South Central Alaska.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
We've got marginal VFR Tuesday morning from the Brooks Range across the North Slope out to the Arctic coast. Otherwise, south slopes of the Brooks Range all the way down to the North Gulf Coast, Bristol Bay, and Alaska Peninsula, VFR, including Nunivak Island and the Seward Peninsula. And the southeast coast, although some IFR pushing up to the coast of Prince of Wales Island later tonight. IFR covering most of Kodiak Island and sliding on up across Fognak Island into Kamishak Bay. IFR from the Bering Strait southward across all of the Aleutians, except on Alaska Island. They're marginal to the western Alaska Peninsula. And for the afternoon Tuesday, marginal VFR pulls back away from the Brooks Range there, but hangs in over the central and eastern Arctic coast. So marginal VFR are lingering over the Brooks Range, and then marginal VFR Seward Peninsula, southward along the Yukon Delta coast, Pribilofs, eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, Nunivak Island. IFR St. Lawrence Island, southwest Bering and Formatka Island, westward to the Komodorskis. IFR east side of Kodiak Island, that extends eastward but does not make the southeast coast. But the marginal VFR zone does, central and south coast, pushing inland across Craig, Klawock, Metlakatla, Ketchikan areas, and Dixon Entrance. And then for the Wednesday morning time frame, IFR Central Arctic Coast, marginal VFR Eastern Arctic Coast, and also marginal for the Noatak Valley, DeLong Mountains, maybe the Kobuk Valley, possibly Selawik for sure, Kotzebue, across the Seward Peninsula, Yukon Delta Coast, Nunivak Island, down to the Alaska Peninsula. And then IFR, Central Aleutians westward again, probably all the way out to the Komodorskis. IFR now just right along the east side of Kodiak, near Cape Chiniak there, maybe Pasagchak, and then eastward across the southern Gulf, but again does not make it to the Panhandle. Marginal VFR does, looks like around Sitka southward, and then in across Dixon Entrance, VFR to the north, VFR over interior Alaska. That holds through Wednesday morning, although marginal VFR progressing eastward and southward there, almost to the Yukon River in the north, but not quite making it. Kobuk, Koyukuk Valleys marginal, back to Kotzebue, Seward Peninsula, northern Bering Sea. IFR from the Pribilofs, central western Aleutians. Another zone of IFR up there for the eastern Arctic coast, down across, into the central Brooks Range, mostly along the north slopes. And for passes Anatuvik, Adigan, both VFR throughout the entire day on Tuesday. Lake Clark and Merrill, good VFR once again for the western Alaska Range. Rainy, VFR, windy, VFR. Isabel, same forecast, VFR, either approach, Mentasta. VFR day coming up again, and for Tanita, good VFR. Portage, VFR, even on the eastern entrance, and Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, gradient up there over the Brooks Range to the Arctic coast, 2,000 feet just south of the Arctic coast, but 8,000 feet up over the mid-Tanana Valley, covering the southeast interior and Panhandle. Cooler air aloft out over the western central Bering Sea, 2,000 to 4,000 feet out that way. Icing, considerable moderate rime icing coming in with that pretty big storm out over the or into the western Aleutians there from Amchitka Island, Shimmy, and Attu. Now they'll see the heaviest icing, and just maybe some isolated moderate rime icing reaching the Alaska Peninsula with that storm to the south of that area. Looking at the jet stream, upper level high pressure at 33,000 feet right over southern Alaska, another center over the Fox Islands. Very weak upper level trough right along this coast of the Panhandle. Northeast winds 60 knots on the northwest side of that. Otherwise, 75 to 85 knot westerlies across the Brooks Range, south 75 knots along the Yukon Delta coast, and 60 knotters out over the Bering Sea. 9,000 feet, 20 to 40 knot winds coming around the southwest part of that high center over the Susitna Valley. Strongest winds coming in toward Kodiak Island, and then southerlies 35 to 45 knots for the western and central Aleutians, 25 knots off the coast of Prince of Wales Island. 3,000 feet, 65 knot winds there for the central and western Aleutian areas, otherwise light and variable for the eastern and northern Bering Sea, southwest 20 western Arctic coast, and maybe 20 to 25 knots out of the east for Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula, but light and variable over the Panhandle. Turbulence, considerable moderate chop of that storm from Matka Island westward to Shimianat 2. Light to isolated moderate chop, Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait, the Aleutian Range, and Alaska Peninsula.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, joined again by Eric Stevens of GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And Eric, thanks so much for joining us again tonight.
Happy to be here, Dave.
Thanks, Eric. And we've been talking about the complex gathering of information from satellites, looking down on the surface of the planet, and some of those orbits around the planet work for Alaska, and some of them don't. There's a lot of challenges with those. How can we get better imagery for the poles and specifically for Alaska?
Right. Well, today we're going to talk about a very interesting kind of satellite orbit that has potential to be real helpful for the high latitudes.
Okay.
Especially us here in Alaska. Canadians, Russians, Norwegians will all be interested in this. The satellites are not in orbit yet. Now the future is uncertain, but it's possible, and if this happens, it will be wonderful for Alaska. Okay. It's called the highly elliptical orbit.
Oh, that sounds
it's interesting. Yeah. And I think first, to help our discussion, we should get back to some of Kepler's laws and how do satellites work.
Sure.
Kepler's first law, an orbit of a planet around a sun or a weather satellite around the Earth is not necessarily a circle, it's an ellipse.
Okay.
And the highly elliptical orbit takes advantage of this aspect. We're going to put the Earth in one of the ellipse and then stretch one of the foci of the ellipse and then stretch that ellipse out real far to make it highly elliptical.
The foci is that bend part of the end of the ellipse. If you're going to stretch out a rubber band, that would be the center, kind of the stretchy part.
Yes.
Ends. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then Kepler's second law says that the closer something is to the thing that it's orbiting, the faster it goes.
Okay.
We see this in the solar system, that Mercury flies around the sun real fast. Jupiter, much slower. Jupiter's further away, it's slower. Mercury's closer in, it's faster. This happens with weather satellites too. Even satellites like the International Space Station, it's pretty close to the Earth. It goes around the Earth in only 90 minutes. That thing is moving. It's only 250 miles away. So how can we take advantage of these two aspects of Kepler's laws of motion to get better weather surveillance of Alaska? And this highly elliptical orbit is going to be the approach. So we have with us today our friendly planet Earth and our simulated satellite, the lid off of this salt shaker
like
here.
Sputnik there. Yeah.
There it is. It's shiny, it's metal, it's space worthy. And what we want to be able to do is, could you have a satellite hover over the top of the world, up over Alaska? You can't really do that. Geostationary satellites have to be over the equator. Okay. So how could we almost solve this? And this is the tricky part. Maybe should we tilt the Earth over?
Focus on the pole. That's what we're trying to accomplish here, right?
So here we have the northern side of the planet, and we're going to trace out the orbit of a satellite with this salt shaker lid here. Now imagine a highly elliptical orbit. So let's put the Earth in one of the foci of the ellipse, and we'll have an imaginary foci out here. So the satellite will not go in a circle around the Earth, but will be in this long strung out ellipse. So the satellite will go...
kind of like a racetrack.
Yes, there you go, like a racetrack. So it's an oval elliptical shape like that. And notice now that when the satellite's over here, we've got a nice view of the northern hemisphere around. There's Alaska, Russia, Canada, Greenland, all there. So that's the ellipse aspect of an orbit, Kepler's first law. The second law saying that when you're further away as a satellite, you go slower. And this we can take real advantage of. Because the way this orbit works, when the satellite goes over Antarctica here, it's going to be close to the Earth. It's going to be moving, whoosh, goes on by. And then as it comes out here, it will slow down. This increases what is known as the dwell time. The satellite will just hang here looking for hours at Alaska and the high Arctic. And then eventually it will come around and it will accelerate and whiz around the South Pole and then come back and hang here for a while because it's further away from the planet. It goes slower. It has to. That's the laws of motion. And such like that, repeating.
Wow.
Now, the real important way to make this work is you have to have two satellites. So that while one is whipping around the pole, you've got the other one out here, and they work as a team. You could then get a series of images of Alaska that can be almost from a constant frame of reference, and you can loop them together to make movies. You can take a picture every 10 minutes, say, of Alaska, and then loop it, playing it at several frames a second. You could see the clouds whiz on by. You know, the Weather Channel, weather broadcasters in the lower 48 especially can show these movie loops from the geostationary satellites. In Alaska, we've never really been able to do that very well, especially in the higher, most northern parts of the state, because those geostationary satellites are over the equator. It's not a good view. And this highly elliptical orbit whipping around the South Pole and then dwelling up here would be a way for us to get that constant frame of reference and do really good weather surveillance over the Arctic, seeing where those storms are, where they're going. Nothing quite like a movie loop of the weather in time to really illustrate what's important, what's going on.
And compared to what we have right now, we just have small windows or snapshots of what's going on with the polar orbiters. We don't have that long range view that's looking top down to give us that complete motion picture that helps us understand so much of the atmosphere at this
There's
point.
so many different kinds of satellites. Each has their advantage. Each is important, and the highly elliptical orbit satellite will also fit into that scheme. It's a nifty idea to solve an Alaskan challenge.
That's fantastic. Well, that sounds really exciting. And again, kind of a satellite dream of the future to come. Okay, very good. Thanks for joining us today, Eric. We really appreciate the information. And if you'd like to learn more about what Eric does at GINA, at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, we invite you to visit the web address that you see on your screen there. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Pretty light variable winds in the forecast for Tuesday along the coast. 5 knots central and south coast, seas at about 4 feet. Variable 10 knots on the north coast, seas 4 to 5 feet. Lincoln Island Glacier Bay, south winds at 10 knots. Variable winds at 10 for Stevens Passage. And Clarence Strait, south winds 10 knots. Outlook for Wednesday. South winds 10 knots for Clarence Strait and northerlies at 10 for the central northern inside channels. South coast east at 10, seas up to 7 feet, so a little higher than Tuesday, and north to northwest winds at 10 knots for the north coast. Prince William Sound, variable winds 10 knots, seas 2 feet. Cook Inlet, variable winds 10 knots with 2-foot seas. Kamishak Bay, variable winds 10 knots, seas 3 feet. Barren Islands, northeast winds 20 knots, seas building to 9 feet, and northeast 15 for the western North Gulf Coast, and then the east side there around Middleton Island, variable winds at 10 knots. Outlook for Wednesday, variable winds 10 knots for the North Gulf Coast, but those seas up to about 6 to 7 feet, north 15 for the Barren Islands, 7-foot seas. Light variable winds for Kamishak Bay, and for Cook Inlet, a west-southwest breeze at 10 knots with 2 to 3 foot seas. And Prince William Sound, light northwest breeze at 10 knots. Kodiak Island, northeast winds 30 knots for small craft advisories, seas 11 to 12 feet. And from Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev, small craft advisories, northeast winds 30 knots with 14 to 15 foot seas. And the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, northeast winds 15 knots. Bristol Bay, northeast at 15. Light variable winds for the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula on Wednesday. Otherwise, Bristol Bay, northwest at 10 knots. 20-knot northeast winds from Cape Sarachev to Sitkinak, including Shelikof Strait, east side of Kodiak Island, northeast winds 15 knots with 8-foot seas. On Alaska Island, north winds 15 to 20 knots. Seas on the north side, 3 feet, but 10 feet on the Pacific side. Otherwise, Adak and Atka, east-southeast, 25 to 30 knot winds, and gale warnings west of Adak to Shemya for east winds at 40 knots and 16-foot seas. For Wednesday, Shemya to Kiska, east winds 30 knots, gale warnings for east winds at 35 knots around Chitka Island. Adak and Atka, east winds 30 to 35 knots, and small craft advisories for Unalaska Island, east winds 25 knots. Unamak Island, east to 20, seas running 4 to 10 feet in the Fox Islands. Pribilof, St. Matthew Island, much of the Bering Sea looking at light variable winds for the day Tuesday, 10 knots or less with slight seas. Yukon Delta Coast, light variable winds at 10 knots. Kuskokwim Delta Coast, call it north at 15. Light variable winds for St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound with seas 2 to 3 feet. West winds 15 knots for Norton Sound on Wednesday. And north 15 for the southwest coast, northeast 20 for St. Matthew Island, Pribilofs northeast at 15, light westerlies at 10 knots for the St. Lawrence Island area with 2-foot seas. Eastern Wilford Sea coast, east winds 10 knots for the day Tuesday, southeast at 15 for the central Arctic coast, western side there, west-east at 15 knots. Light variable winds from Wales to Cape Thompson at 5 knots, and then south winds 10 knots Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort. And that light variable 5 to 10 knot wind pattern continues into Wednesday. Central coast and west side westerlies 10 to 15 knots, and then southeast 15 knots around Prudhoe Bay, turn east at 20 knots from Kaktovik demarcation point, Barter Island. And for tonight, light variable winds, low clouds and fog along the Arctic coast, and some clouds over the north slope under high pressure. Risk of an evening thunderstorm along that trough axis from the southwest there in along and just south of the Yukon River. Otherwise, low clouds and fog, southern Cook Inlet, North Gulf Coast, and along the Panhandle, covering much of the Gulf of Alaska. Kodiak Island could see some drizzle there on the east side, and some light rain and drizzle moving into the Alaska Peninsula. Increasing winds for the western Aleutians and rain. That pushes to Adak with gale force winds in the forecast there Tuesday. Increasing rain Kodiak Island. Fair and warm over interior Alaska again. Highs in the upper 60s to upper 70s. Maybe some afternoon showers there in the west, keeping it cooler. And the southern Panhandle as well. But for Wednesday, rain across much of the Aleutians from Nikolsky westward. Drying out for Kodiak Island, starting to clear up a little bit, and the northern interior seeing more shower activity along the Brooks Range into the Kobuk Valley and Seward Peninsula.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.